That's awesome. That's that whole application thing and what you do with it, I think is so important. I would even say with whoever your leader is, like whatever ministry you're in, even just ask them, hey, which one do you think is the lowest one for me? Here's what I think it is. I think it's driven, or I think it's open, and just to ask them how to get better in that. Because again, for us, it's just trying to come up with what we get better. And I encourage people to do that on the weekends too. Is hey, if like write stuff down, but what you want is what is God speaking to you specifically, and how is He growing you? So that was all about. This is who leaders are. This next session, we're going to talk about what leaders do. And for me, especially for you guys, when you look in the Bible, there are a couple different places where you have these teams. The disciples are really Jesus' teams, if you will, the people who went around with him and did ministry. But probably the team that I lean towards, and we're going to look at today, it's David's team with all of his mighty men. Like it's the story of when basically, David at one point, if you look at the arc of the story, it's pretty amazing because David thought he was going to be the guy. Like he thought he was going to be the king, and Samuel came and he anointed him, and then he was in the palace playing for Saul, and in his mind, this is going to be an easy path. At some point, probably David was going to marry one of Saul's daughters, which happened, and then he was just going to end up being the king. But the path towards the palace was not this smooth journey. He ended up going out, kind of left there, ended up in caves, and he just had these warriors kind of draw themselves to them until suddenly, like he's got this band, like this mini army that he's got and he's going around with. Well, you guys, for your place church, you really are that mighty men and women of God. Like you are his mighty men that have landed at this place, and God is using you to move something forward and accomplish a vision of what God's doing. And so I love looking into teams and asking, okay, what can we learn from David's mighty men, and for us as the mighty men and women as we go through it. So, and part of the reason why I love this as well is because for me, I've always been on a team. Like I said earlier, I've never been the lead guy. So there's a little part of me that's like, we're going to do it. We are going to bind together because we have a leader who has a vision. We're going to bind together. We're going to come together, and we're going to make this happen. And so his stories of his mighty men are pretty amazing. And I think for us, God's going to use us in some ways too. So we're going to look at this 4 things mighty men and women do. So 4 things mighty men and women, because there are women in the room, come on. 4 things that we do. And we're going to look at 4 different things and how we can learn from those things. So 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 18, talks about one of David's mighty men. He says, the Spirit came on Amasai, chief of the 30, and he said, we are yours, David. We are with you, son of Jesse. Success to you, and success to those who help you, for your God will help you. 4 things that mighty men and women do. The first thing is that they cheered their leader on. One of the things that we have the ability to do as the team, as the mighty men and women, is to cheer our leader on. I told you I have 2 kids, 13 and 11, Carson and Bryden, and we are Ohio State fans. Now, I don't know how big college football is here, but my wife grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and we are Ohio State fans. And so my son, he loves Ohio State. Then we have a good friend who's a huge Auburn fan. So it's Ohio State and then Auburn. It's so random, but that's the way that he lands. My oldest son's current plan is to go and play football at Ohio State for 2 years, and then to transfer to Auburn to play football at Auburn for 2 years, and try to do a dual sport, football and basketball, and then be drafted, of course, in the first round and in the NFL. Like, he believes this so much that when he learned that we were like saving some money for his college, he legitimately was offended and said, do you not believe enough in me that I'm going to get a scholarship? Like he was like heartbroken, and we're like, oh no, like it's no, we're trying to help. But he was like, so you don't think I'm going to get a scholarship? We're like, wait a minute, this is not the effect you want to have on your kid. But he'll get drafted into the NFL, and then he's going to play in the NFL until he's 30 or 32, and then he's going to finish his career in the NBA. And this is his current plan, and this is what my son is going to do. And as his dad, you know what I do? I tell him yes. I tell him yes. You know why? Because the words of a father create the identity and the future of a child. The words of a father will unlock the limits in their mind. And most times when we hear limits in our lives, it's because there is someone who put them on us, and it's somebody's words in our head. So for me, I've decided. The world will tell him no, but I'm going to tell him yes. The world will tell him what he can't do. I am going to cheer him on, okay? God has huge things for this church, and God has huge things in this community. We have the ability to cheer it on. We have the ability, I talked about this earlier, but we have the ability to say yes. Like the future of what's going to happen here has a lot to do with our ability to cheer on what's happening, to cheer on the vision, to get behind the vision, and to make sure that we're actually getting into it. And here's what my encouragement. So I'll say this because as the guest, I'll say this. For Pastor Darian and Tyra, I think as your church continues to grow, one thing that I think you love about this church, it feels like family. Like it just feels like, man, we're just connected, we're in a family. The danger of that as you guys continue to grow is that because it feels so much like family, it feels so familiar. And I heard a statement, familiarity breeds contempt. Like it's so familiar that it's no longer special. It's so familiar that we no longer remember what we got in these leaders. Like it's so familiar, like it's like, hey bro, hey man. And I don't think your culture is like, hello bishop. Like it's not that. But there is a component of pastor. Like there is a component of and what I would say is, and I haven't been around your church in a long time. I haven't been around, but I just know as you guys continue to grow, there is a component of there is a divine calling on the leader. Again, and this is from a guy who's not like, I have never been that, so I'm not like there's a calling on me, so there's also a calling on him. It's not that. I have recognized that there is a unique calling on the leader who understands there are pressures, there are callings, God speaks to him in certain ways, there are things that are pulling on him. And for us, one of the things that we can do is we have no idea the battles that are being fought behind the scenes. We have no idea what's going on. Like very few people, when Moses stood up on the hill and Joshua was fighting the battle, very few people saw Moses. Like they all saw the fight that was going on, but very few people saw Moses. Most of us do not see what's happening behind the scenes. One of the things that David's mighty men did is they just believed in David. David, you're going to be the king. All right, let's go to bed. Where are we going to sleep? I'll take this part of the cave, and you take this part of the cave. Like they saw he was going to be king before he was ever king. They saw that he was going to be king while they slept in a cave. They saw he was going to be king while they were hiding from the king. But they just saw it. They just believed in it. They believed in the vision of what God was going to do. And for us as the mighty men and women, like for us, we got to believe it. We got to believe it and we got to speak it out. And we got to see it like, hey, we got it. This is happening. It's going to be amazing. It's going to go good. If you see something not go good, you go to the other side. Hey, we're good. We're going to keep going forward. Like because we cheer them on. One of the things that we have the ability to do as leaders is we have the ability to cheer them on. We don't allow ourselves to get so familiar with it that it lacks the speciality of like what it is. Like we don't allow ourselves to get familiar with it. Also, here's what I would say is that we don't get so familiar. Familiarity, it'll make it so that it takes away it being special. It also will lull us into complacency. And as leaders, I would just encourage you. I think the danger of a church your size right now is that it's good. It's awesome. Life is good. And what happens is when life is good, the urgency to get better, it kind of just goes away. Most marriages that end up not being good is not because they've always not been good. It's because at one point they were good and people stopped trying to make them better. And they gradually, and for us, if your team, we're good. Okay, as the leaders, the people on the team, they don't have to do this, but as leaders, being good is not good enough. Like as leaders, we have to continue to make it better. As leaders, we have to keep that urgency up. We got to grow the team. We got to make it better. We got to build the chemistry. Like we have to do whatever we can do to continue moving forward. We can't allow the familiarity of it all to kind of lull us into that. So we have to be cheerleaders for our leader. We have to be cheerleaders for our vision. We have to continue being the loudest ones going, we can do it, we can do it, we can do it, and believing in them. And I don't know what that looks like specifically with you and your relationship with Pastor Darian and Tyra and the leaders and the staff and like everybody here at the church. I would just encourage you, you have a unique voice because you're on the inside, and when someone on the inside speaks encouragement, someone on the inside tells people you can do it, and somebody on the inside does it, there's a whole different level of encouragement. Like there's a whole different fuel to that. So we have to be those leaders who encourage. We have to cheer our leaders on. How are you doing at cheering on the vision? Cheering on your pastor, cheering on your leader. And then in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, it says, all these fighting men who volunteered to serve in the ranks, they came to Hebron fully determined to make David king over all Israel. I love this. They came going, we are determined to make you the king. And all the rest of the Israelites were also of one mind to make David king. And it says in verse 38, and here's the second point, they volunteered. They volunteered. They would gladly do for free what others got paid to do. And I remember when I was 21 years old, again, we moved to Fort Myers and started church. And honestly, we didn't know if it would work. And we certainly weren't sure that we'd ever get paid for it. Like, will you ever go in full-time ministry? We don't even know. But one of the things we did when we moved to Fort Myers to start Next Level is we went to parks and we filled up balloons with helium, and then we would go around with this huge thing of balloons. We would go to parks and we would hand out these balloons with little flyers tied to the balloon string. The problem is in Florida, you know what happens to helium balloons in 95-degree heat? They pop. So here's what we would do. We would walk up to a kid with a helium balloon and go, hey, here, man, so awesome. Number one, a kid doesn't even want to play with the balloon. They're at a park. What are you doing giving a kid a balloon at a park? So now we have to give them to the parent. The parent sits there, the kid's playing, and now we walk away, and 10 minutes later, the balloons all start popping. And we realize this is a really, really bad strategy. Like, this has not worked out very well. And we realize this is like this is not working, okay? That didn't work. There are story after story of things that we tried. It just didn't work, okay? But we're like, we believe it can happen. I remember we had these flyers that we made, these homemade flyers, and I remember walking around Walmart at 9 o'clock at night handing out flyers to people. I was the weird dude at Walmart at 9 o'clock at night inviting people to church. It was the most awkward, weird, whatever experience ever as we went through it. But you know what? It was going to happen. And it had to happen. And I was going to do whatever it took to make sure that this church happened. Okay? What was that for you? Like, do you remember the first time? Do you remember when you got saved? And for some of us, it happened years and years ago. But do you remember? You remember that moment when you realized that God had something for you? Do you remember when you first started serving or realized, I actually think God's going to use me? You remember that thing of, God, I will do anything. I don't know if you had a youth camp experience, youth camp is that. Like, I will do anything, anywhere, whatever you ask, wherever you go, wherever. Okay? I think one of the best things we can do is to allow ourselves to go, hey, even now, no matter what stage you're in, no matter where you're at, no matter what season you're in, is go, God, I will do whatever you ask me to do, and I'm not sure how it's going to work. I don't know what the future looks like, but I volunteer again and again and again because, God, I choose that no matter what. Like, we have to allow our heart and that passion to continue to stay in us. We have to, like his men, we have to volunteer. They had volunteered, and they volunteered again, and we have to continue to make sure that we get to a place as leaders where we are volunteering. As leaders, we have to remember that feeling and remain volunteers. And then in verse 39, it says, the men spent 3 days there with David, eating and drinking, for their families had supplied provisions for them. Also, their neighbors came from far away as Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali, and they came bringing food on donkeys, camels, mules, and oxen. And there were plentiful supplies of flour, fig cakes, raisin cakes, wine, olive oil, cattle, and sheep, for there was joy in Israel. A third thing that mighty men and women do is they enjoy each other. They enjoy each other. And one thing I think is a characteristic of your church is that it seems like you guys all like each other. That's a good thing, guys. I don't know if you know this, that's a good thing. And what's been interesting, and through COVID and kind of on the other side of COVID, what's been interesting is throughout with where people are at. I heard this phrase from a guy named Henry Cloud, and he called it learned helplessness. And he said that whenever you go through something and you consistently fail over and over and over and over again, or you experience a traumatic experience, what happens is you begin to believe that you actually have no power over your circumstance. During COVID, I can't. Our culture has a little bit of this learned helplessness going on. They don't believe they can. Let's all get together. We can't. Okay, which is interesting because there are some things we say there's no way we could do it, and yet here we all are sitting in the room doing this. We can't have a team meeting. Well, we're doing this. Yeah, we can't have a family night, but we're doing this. Like it's weird how our mind has now, there are certain segments of things that we were comfortable doing we're no longer comfortable doing, even though we do other things that are just as out there as what that would be. Okay? For us, I think the thing with the church that people have realized, online's great. You can go to any online church right now. You can go to the best churches in the nation online. I mean, it's incredible. The biggest churches in the world, you can go online right now. But you know what's happening? Everybody's isolated and nobody's together. And as a church, that's what we have to figure, that's what we have to bring in. Because the hallmark of Your Place Church is that this is a family. People enjoy being together. They love this. Okay, you guys love to hang out. You love sitting around and connecting and doing this. And so for us at Grace Family Church in Tampa, we've said, hey, we are going to figure out a way to connect. We're going to figure out a way to get together. We're going to figure out a way to be a family again. And it's been interesting for me because I've talked to some of our team. I'm like, hey guys, we got your team, your worship team, you got to get together and throw a Christmas party. You got to get together and you got to hang out. You got to get together and you got to do this. And you know what the response has been? But we can't because it's COVID. And what I've said is, but guys, we have church services. And we can't say we're going to have church services, can't have parties. Like if we're having church services, we're going to have parties and we're going to go through it. And what I've told them is, and this is what I'll tell all of us, our job is when we are in the midst of something, our job is to experience it and lead. Our job is not to experience it and sit. We look forward and go, what are we comfortable doing? And now we are going to lead forward and do it. With our teams, with your teams, you know the way that you're going to reach the community, the way that you're going to is to go, how do we get the family feel and continue to increase that in our church? How do you guys continue to grow this next season? Listen, because so many people are isolated, they have lost that family feeling even with their family. And there are lots of people across the nation that are comfortable being in different environments. How do you come up with environments to get people together? Because there is an element of we connect together. And we like being around each other. And here's what I would say. What this means on the team is we have to look at creating family environments consistently so that we can get together with our teams and with our people and hang out and in small groups so that we can constantly connect. The other thing I would say about this, because we actually enjoy being together, is that if you have a problem with somebody, if you have an issue with someone as the leaders, this requires that you deal with these issues. Okay? That the number one thing, so that will take down a church is disunity. That's it right there. It's disunity. It'll mess you up. And it happens so slowly. It happens so subtly. It just happens over time. And the way that happens in a church setting, is that you have a church. We'll just call this a church. Okay? There's a church. And you have a group of people that all hang out together. I'm not going to draw everybody here, but they hang out together. And what happens is you have someone in the group have an issue with the church or someone in the church or a person or a leader. And what they do is instead of talking and going to the church and having a conversation, what do? They come to their group and they have an issue and they talk about their issue with everybody in the group. And then somebody else eventually will have another issue with the church because that's just how life works. And then they'll come in and they'll talk about it. and they'll have an issue, and then somebody else will have an issue, and they'll come in and they'll talk about it. And what happens is you end up getting this web of gossip where everyone just is talking about it, and then over time, and I've seen this in groups, over time, then somebody has an issue in the group, and then everybody else starts adopting their issues, and now every time there's an issue, there's more conversation, more talk, more issues, and now suddenly you've got not only your issues, but also multiple issues with multiple people, and you have all of these things going on, and you've never actually gone and talked about it. That's how church splits happen. That's how church splits happen. Everybody has issues, nobody's having conversations. Matthew 18, if you have aught with a brother, if you have problem with someone, if you have an issue with someone, what do? You go to them. You go to them, okay? On this team, you're going to offend each other. You're going to be mad at each other. You're going to have an issue with each other. Like that's just what happens. What we do when we have an issue with someone is not to go to our group. That is gossip. That is sin. That is what that is. We don't go tell anybody else who does not have the ability to solve anything. We go to them, and we talk about it, and we bring up the issue. Because the problem with this is when I have an issue with you, and I talk to this group about the issue that I have with you, the emotion's gone. And now I don't feel the urgency to talk about it with you, and yet my issue still remains. But the emotion's gone. Well, eventually that catches up to you and the emotion all comes back. And so what we do is we go to them, and we talk to them. We go, hey, you really hurt my feelings. You really offended me, or you really did this. This group has to be committed that whenever you have a problem with someone, you talk to that person about it, and you sit down and you have the conversation. And people always say, but what if they don't listen? Listen, most times, when you're having a hard conversation with someone, most times, you know what you say after you've had the conversation? Well, that went a lot better than I thought it would. Like always, right? That's what happens. You know why? Because it usually goes a lot better than you thought it would. Don't do it by text. Don't do it by email. Don't comment on their social media, even passive aggressively. Don't post on social media that some people in the world, blah, blah, blah. We all know who you're talking about. Don't do it, okay? That doesn't work. It doesn't happen. What you need to do is you have to sit down and have that conversation, because when we sit down face to face, sorry, I keep saying, tell me your name real quick. Okay, so when Jamie and I sit down face to face, you know what? Jamie, he actually has a good heart. And I actually have a good heart. And you have a good heart. But when we don't talk about it, and I talk about Jamie with another group, we all start to believe that Jamie's heart's jacked up. And when we text, when he replies, I hear about Jamie's heart with a jacked up heart. And when I email and when I post, I can't hear the heart. This is why social media arguing doesn't work, because you can't hear the heart. We stop assuming that person has the right heart. But if I sit down with Jamie and go, Jamie, man, you really hurt my feelings. And I talk about feelings and talk about my heart, and Jamie talks about his heart, okay, that's how you work out an issue. But the world, and maybe the enemy, you can call it the enemy, has created all of these systems where we no longer have to have this face-to-face conversation, because it feels face-to-face over text. But I'll tell you what, if you've ever tried to argue with someone over text, argue with somebody over email, I have tried to argue with people over email, and woo! It is Proverbs 6:20 maybe, at 26:20, it says, when you remove the wood from a fire will go out. And when you remove words from a gossip, a quarrel will cease. Okay? At some point on social media over text, you have to remove the wood from the fire. And so for me, everybody has dysfunctional families depending on the stories they tell. But my mom some days, I don't even know what it is. I think she fights with my sister, and then my sister's like, yeah, but Mike said, even though I never said it, my sister's just that way. And so my mom will send me these texts. She hasn't done it in a while, but she'll send me these texts, like long text. I can't believe that you blah, 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 blah. You know what I do? I don't read it. I delete it. And then I text her, hey, Mom, I didn't read your text, but I read the first part, and it sounds like you're really frustrated at me about something. I would love to talk to you about it. When you get a chance, give me a call. When you calm down, give me a call. Blah, 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 blah. Delete. Reply. I didn't read that one either, just so you know. Somebody in the church, I can't believe the church would blah, 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 and you don't want masks, and you don't wear masks, and you're trying to kill everybody, and blah, blah, blah. I can tell this is a very passionate issue for you. When can we sit down face to face and talk? It's terrible to do because it's so much harder and you're nervous. And, I got to sit down with them and it's weird and it's awkward. But one of the best things you can do to put out a fire, don't put words to it. It'll blow up because I can do it. Like I'm like, oh, you're gonna get it. Woo! Like we all feel that way. Like if you've never felt more empowered than you've replied to a mean email. And you're like, oh, I am right. Copy all. Send it to everybody. Woo! And, but they're never like, oh, my gosh, I never saw it that way. Their email's just as long, and they just kill you on that email, too. So you got to sit down with them. And here's what I would say. And you can't just talk about what they did. You got to talk about how you feel. The conversation has to be brought towards emotion. It hurt my feelings. Man, I felt so disrespected. I just felt like that this was, because as soon as you talk about how it made you feel, they talk about how they felt. And that's the point. And then, not only is the emotion gone, but the issue's gone. That's how we stay unified. We can't allow the devil to get a foothold. We have to constantly be having those conversations. We have to constantly be together. One of the strengths of this church, which is where the enemy will attack, is the fact that you guys all like being around each other. You all connect. The lobby on the weekends is a lively environment. You guys, like Pastor Darian had to make 4 announcements to get you guys back in here because you're all hanging out. That's the beauty of this group. So if you got a problem, you run to it and you talk to them, and you sit down with them, and you have those conversations. But what if they don't listen? Again, if you have the conversation and you just can't get there, what do? Matthew 18, then you take somebody with you. And you bring somebody in. And then the third thing is, and if they still don't listen, then you go to the church. And that's when you get leadership involved. That's when you go, hey, Jamie and I just can't figure it out. Because some of it is, Jamie and I can't figure it out. Hey, well, you bring your wife, or we're going to bring a friend in, and they're going to help us mediate. Okay, they can't do it. Okay, then take it before the church. That's not okay, now Jamie and I have to stand up on the stage. It's not like, you're up, Jamie, here we go. Let's vote them out. Here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, do whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes. Bring a leader into that point. Hey, keep having the conversation because you got to, because if you continue to read Matthew 18, he says, because where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am with them. God can accomplish huge things when we're unified. And so keep talking, keep working through it. Don't get stuck in this, Jamie and I just avoid each other. Listen, the church isn't big enough. And it will never be big enough for you to be able to avoid somebody. You got to work those things out, got to talk through it. So they enjoyed being around each other. And then in 1 Samuel chapter 26, the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, is not David hiding? Is he not hiding in the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshimon? Which I'm just making all these. I'm making up it's probably not right, but I'm putting accents wherever. So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 select Israelite troops. So he's looking for David with 3,000 troops. I don't think we really understand how many troops 3,000 are, but it's this huge army to look for this guy. 3,000 troops to search there for David. And Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hachilah, facing Jeshimon. But David stayed in the wilderness. And when he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. So David realized, okay, he's coming after me. He's close. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. So David, think about this. 3,000 soldiers are looking for him. And David's like, let's go see. He takes his mighty men to go to the edge of the camp and just maybe stand up on a hill and just see all of these soldiers. I mean, again, it seems so stupid, but he's like, I just want to go see what they're doing. I want to go see this crowd that's actually after me. And he said, he was there with Saul and Abner, son of Ner, and the commander of the army had laid down, and Saul was lying inside the camp with his army encamped around him. So Saul was in the middle, everybody's around him. And then David then asked Amalek the Hittite and Abishai, son of something, Joab's brother, who will go down into the camp with me to Saul? So David comes up, stands on this hill, and looks down and sees 3,000. And he realizes, okay, I see kind of the fires and the lights and the big tents in the middle. There's Saul down there. And he looks at a couple of his guys and he goes, hey, anybody want to go down with me? Now, at this point, you got to think, no, Saul, I don't want to go down, or David, I don't want to go down with you because there's 3,000 soldiers around where you're trying to go. But David has this idea, who wants to go down with me? And Abishai says, I'll go down with you. Only one guy. And David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head, and Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. The fourth thing that mighty men and women do is that they follow their leader to dangerous places. They follow a leader to dangerous places. My story, for about a year, I lived in Alabama, Birmingham. Oh, did you say ew? Is that what you said? It's beautiful. Trust me. Don't worry. It's, so we lived in Birmingham for a year, and one of the things that we did, it was a couple years, no, it was, so anyway, so we lived there for a year, and we went hiking with our boys on a trail. And we were taking them on this trail, and it was about 2 miles to where we were going, and then at the end of the trail, you basically have to scale this rock wall to get down, or this rock face to get down. And you have to scale it, and it wasn't too bad. It was 15 feet, but it's a little bit tricky, and my kids saw this rock wall, and they're like, we're not doing it. Let's just go back. And I'm like, guys, trust me, you want to go down, let's just go down. And they're like, we don't want to. And I'm like, guys, just trust me. So I kind of helped them figure out how to go down, because I knew at the bottom of this rock face there was a waterfall. And I knew where I was trying to get them to go. They thought I was leading them to a place of danger. I knew that I was leading them to a place that they would love. Pastor Darian, over the next years, there are going to be certain things that God will speak to him, and you will think to yourself, no. And he'll sit with you, and some of the leaders will sit with you, and they'll go, hey, I think this is your next step. I think you need to do this. I think you need to stand up and do this. I think this is a team you need to lead. This is an area you need to grow in. And your first response will feel like it's danger. But he knows where the waterfall is. And there is something unique, and this is what I don't understand because I've not been a lead pastor. There's the unique thing about the vision. There's a unique thing about the calling, that he will see things before we see them. He will see things before we have the ability to see them. And he's going to sit with you and go, hey, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. And you are going to not just fear or feel a little bit off about it. Like there will be a fear that comes up in you. But as leaders, we follow them into the dangerous places. And we look on and go, man, we've got to trust our leaders. We've got to trust that they're hearing from Jesus and they're hearing from God and the Holy Spirit speaking to them, and that we are open to whatever that looks like. And I'm not saying, and here's what I would say, that some of us, maybe you've been burnt by church before. I know we talked a little bit about, and so in some cultures and some environment, the pastor would be like, hey, God told me you're supposed to, and they kind of use the whole God told me thing to kind of manipulate and do some of that. And again, and that's where I would say, for me, after knowing Pastor Darian for years now, that's not who he is. He's not going to play the God card on you. He's not going to do that stuff. That's where I think you can trust him. And you could trust him to lead you through this. And there are going to be places the church has to go, the church and the community has to go. And through talking about where Pryor Creek, where Mays County, where all of this is going, God's got so much going that you guys are going to have to enter into some dangerous places. And so as the mighty men and women, there is a component of just saying yes. And here's what I would say, and this is for me, one of the things I learned early on in my leadership journey is, if you say yes, it's amazing to see what God does. We were doing a series, and in the series, they needed someone to do skydiving. And they came in and asked me, it's probably about 8 years ago, they came in and said, hey, Mike, we need someone to do skydiving. Would you do skydive? Would you skydive? Now, I am extremely scared of heights. Very scared of heights. This stage is about as tall as it gets. I just get a little bit freaked out in heights. But one thing I learned is you just say yes. You just say yes to different opportunities. And I remember, I don't know if you've ever been skydiving before. You ever been skydiving before, but you go to the place, and everyone who works at a skydiving place, they're not as professional as you want them to be. They actually seem like they should be working at a skydiving place. You're like, are you the guys that I'm trusting with my life? And they put a little thing on you and they strap you up, and then you go and you sit in this plane. And I remember I was sitting on the floor of this airplane, this little airplane with no seats in it, and the only seat was a pilot, and the pilot was right here facing there, and I'm sitting there, and I can see out the door. I don't know if you know this, but airplanes don't have to be sealed completely. I think in movies that it's taught me that it should be, but it's not, at least as high at 10,000 feet. You don't have to be, because I can see out the crack of the door, and I can see clouds. And we get up to the clouds and get just above the clouds, and the guy leans over to me and goes, "We're halfway there." I'm like, halfway? Let's just do it now. We're dead anyways. Let's just do it. And I am so nervous, and I'm sitting there, and I'm freaking out. And they go, "Okay, we're almost there." And they have me on my knees. I have to turn around on my knees, and there is the instructor who gets behind me who has to clip in because we are jumping together. Now, typically, I don't want a man that close to me, but in that scenario, I'm like, bring it in. Like, bear hug, tighten it up, baby. I'll just give you the back hug. We're in this together because we're about to jump out of an airplane, and this is going to be crazy. And so he says, "I'm going to open the door," and when I open the door, we're gonna jump out. And here's what you're going to do: you're going to step onto the wing or the something, whatever it is, and you're going to 1, 2. Whew, and then you're just basically really close to death. You're on your way towards death and towards dying. And at 1, 2, 3, and we do it. And I scream the whole way. And here's the thing they don't tell you, though, if you're scared of heights about jumping out of an airplane. By the time they pull the parachute, you're still really far away. Like, you still think you're going to die. Like, it doesn't just, it's not like, oh, we're safe now. You're not safe until you reach the ground, okay? You're just not safe. And so we're going down, and he goes, "Hey, let me help you out." And he loosens something, and you only drop about that far. Like, it's supposed to make you feel better. It did not make me feel better. I was not. And he said, "Okay, well, I'm going to give you the cord and pull it down to your knee." And he gives me the cord, and I pull it down about that far, and you turn. And I'm like, "Okay, I'm good." He goes, "No, pull it down to your knee." And I pull it down a little bit, and we turn. I go, "Man, I'm good. I don't know." He goes, "No." And he pulls it down, and this is probably not actually what happened, but this is how it felt, is that we started doing like the flat spin going around. And I said, "Hey, man, like, we're up here, and you're in charge, but I'm a lot bigger than you. And if you do that again when we get on the ground, like, I am..." Like, stop, just stop, okay? You're just freaking me out. It's not good. And so then we come down and we land, and I have a video of this, and we land after skydiving, and you know what everyone does when they're done skydiving? Huh? Because things are always scary at the top. Things are always scary before you do them. Fear is not an indicator of something you shouldn't do. Fear is an indicator of something you should do. Like, if you have fear, my encouragement for you is to lean into it. It's to not, like with relationships, with leadership stuff, if there's an opportunity that comes up and you're like, "Oh, I don't think I can do it." Like, train yourself to lean in. Train yourself to say yes. Like, God's given us different opportunities, like given me different opportunities to go and to do different things and lead different things and speak different places. And I'm like, I don't know. But what God does when you say yes, what God does in those moments, and afterwards, you feel yes. It's a story of Moses. If you read the story of Moses, the Israelites came to Moses and they said, "Why would you lead us out here to die when they're at the Red Sea? Why didn't you just leave us in Egypt? Why do you lead us out here to die?" And Moses stands up and says, "Don't worry, God will be there. You need only stand still." And then in the next verse, God is speaking to Moses. So Moses says that. Moses walks off, and God says to Moses, "Moses, why are you crying out to me?" You know what Moses did? "Do not worry. You need only be still." Hey, God, are we dead? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? Okay? He said, no, you got to move on. He said, move on. Raise up your staff and go. And at the end of those verses, when they went through, it said, and the people trusted in God and in the servant Moses. It's because he went through. He cried out to God. He was scared. He was freaked out. But he went in the direction that God led him to go. For us, if there's fear, if you're unsure, if it feels dangerous, there are moments in time where you know what? It may feel that way, but we're going to go. And if God has called you to your place, church, and if God has called you to be under the leadership of Pastor Darian and Tyra, they're gonna have some ideas, and it's gonna feel dangerous. And now that you can't push back on some of that, but there is a component of, hey, we're gonna push back, but we will say, our answer is yes. Have you thought about this? Great. Okay, our answer is yes. But what about this? The answer is yes, but how about here? And I think when we do that, again, it's that idea of throwing fuel on the fire, that what we're going to see and what you're going to see at your place church is going to be incredible. And if you as a group can decide, we are going to go to the dangerous places and we're going to do whatever we can to support our leader, I believe that is going to play such a huge part in what God does in the next season at your place church. All right, let me pray for you guys. Father, I am so grateful to be here with these leaders. So grateful for what you're doing with this team and the way you're continuing to stretch them, the way you're continuing to grow them. And God, I just pray that you would help us to say yes. I pray you'd help us to say yes to whatever we're looking at right now, whatever situation we're facing right now. And God, I pray that for some of us who maybe have disengaged, maybe we feel like that through this season of COVID and everything going on, that God, we're just not as in as we once were. Father, I pray that you would help us to re-up. You would help us to re-up with what you're doing, and that God, you would rebuild a passion. If that's you, if you feel that way, just come on, just open your hands up. Maybe open your hands up. And that God, we receive from you right now. We receive your anointing. We receive your passion. We receive your calling, Jesus. Put a fresh anointing on us and a fresh anointing on this team. That Father, you would move in their hearts and you would move in their passion. And God, you would excite them again about what you're doing here. God, you would help this team to believe again in what you're doing. And God, we know it's going to be huge. God, I pray that you would give the team courage to go to the dangerous places and wisdom to lead there. Help them lead well in this next season. And God, I pray that you would move in an incredible way at this church. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. All right, what are some thoughts or how you're processing all that?
Hey, so this is, I raised my hand real quick, but she got to me before. So about optimism. So I work at Walmart. I love it to death. But when you walk in, there's an attitude of negativity, like, no, I don't want to be here. And when you're surrounded by that, when you're in a workplace where you feel like you're the only one trying to be positive, how do you keep yourself aligned with that?
That's a great question. So how do you, well, and that's, well, I'm trying. I have like different verses coming to my head, and even different sayings like bad character. But here's what I would say: every day you have to choose. Every day it is your responsibility. And if God has called you there, then what I would say is, if that's where you feel like this is where He has me, this is where we have an advantage over, or like of understanding God has me here, and as long as He has you here, we do not abdicate the responsibility of who we are to the people around us. That we will decide every day to be positive. We will decide every day to change the environment. And I believe when you do that, God will give you opportunities to help people, to guide them, to lead them. And again, they're just going to be negative people around you. That is life in general. That will be anywhere you go. And I would say most likely right now, God has you in this season at Walmart because He is building up the muscle of your will. Because in the next season, you're going to need that muscle. So if God has kept you where you are, even though you don't want to be where you are, you have to assume that if he will not change what's happening on the outside, it's because he is doing a work on the inside. And so the work he's doing in you right now and what he's developing in you and growing in you and strengthening in you, he has put you in a situation to basically force you to get stronger because you don't know what's coming next, but whatever you're doing next, that's what he's preparing you for. Yeah. Good. That was like super intense answer for your question, but
So, excuse me. So, I have this deep seated belief that, and I've just like made it who I am, that I'm not a leader and I can't do things. I mean, it's just like not built into me. And as a matter of fact, I'm only here because my friend wanted me to accompany her. And
that's awesome.
But I have realized this morning that that's not the truth. It's just a lie. And I've let it limit me in so many ways, here, work, everywhere, because I didn't believe I had it in me. Now, I know that to be truth, but I don't have a fat clue where to start changing that.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to say yes and go into very scary places. I've determined that, but like changing it on the inside and my thoughts, I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So
What I would say with that, so the thing that's helped me, we are all the result, that we tend to be the result of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so we've just learned those either from growing up, somebody told us we weren't good at something like that. And so we have these stories about ourselves we tell ourselves that aren't necessarily true. We need someone to help us go, hey, that's not true. Hey, that's a lie. For me, I went to a counselor because there were some lies that I believed about myself that they just weren't true. And so I had to have somebody go, hey, that's not true. And so I went through to identify that. He helped me guide me through the process. What I would say is identifying what are some of those things, some of those commentaries about yourself that you're hearing, and then replacing them with truth. So what he had me do is for 6 weeks, every morning, I would go, I rebuke the lie that I'm not worthy. The truth is, because I'm a son of God, I'm worthy. I had 15 of those every morning. I would say it out loud. And then multiple times a day, depending on the day, because you have to retrain the story that you're telling about yourself. And you have to and even if you ever feel insecure, anything ever comes up, it's catching it. It's taking the thoughts captive. So you have to take the thought captive and you have to bring it into the submission of Christ. And the way you do that is you take a lie and you bring it into submission under the truth of who God says you are and who you are. And so some of that is again, a counselor helped me because I don't know that I by myself could have sat down and said, oh, I think this about myself, it's a lie. And what he actually did is give me a list of things and go, do you believe this? Do you believe this? Do you believe this? And it was like, yeah, I do believe that. And that was a lie. It was had to identify that. So that's where I would say you have to start telling yourself differently, choosing different. When we talked about the choosing to believe and see yourself as a different person, and that begins to reshape and renew your mind. And I think when you do that, God will use that process. I know that's the answer a little bit is like, go see a counselor, but for me, it really was. I think doing that on your own because your normal tends to be what you grew up with and what you were around. So if growing up, this was kind of just what you were told and you've just believed it, it's hard to undo that because it's hard. I know it's not right, but I don't know what is right. And so you need someone to take you through the process of identifying what's not right so that you can kind of reshape your mind around what's right. Yeah. Good. Bishop.
So speaking to the point number 3, enjoy each other, and you were talking about disunity is the number one thing that will take down a church. It applies in a team, a family. It applies in every area of your life. I just kind of wrote a question off to the side here. What if you'd rather not serve than have to deal with someone I'm offended with or frustrated with? I would rather just not serve if I have to be this person that has to deal with that. I don't feel like, obviously, that's God's best for that person or that individual. how would you speak? How would you encourage them to step into that pain, to step into that?
Yeah, I would say that for most of us, and this is true, I think, with every relationship, and I think it's true with where we're at, is that there are different thresholds of pain that you'll have to push through to continue to grow. That's true relationally. If you're married, you're going to have to push through different thresholds, like different awkward conversations. And what I would say is, and this is true, for marriage counseling, one of the things I try to get pre-marrieds to really understand is that whenever you decide that you're not going to talk about something, so your sex life, money, communication, like when you decide, okay, that's too awkward, all we do is fight about it, we're just not going to, we're not going to figure it out, we're just not going to talk about it. As soon as you decide we're not going to talk about it, that doesn't just stunt your growth in that area, that has the ability to stunt your growth in every area, because you've now said, I'm not, like I've closed off now, I'm not open anymore. I think that we think I can have an issue with you and leave it unresolved, but it's not going to affect everybody else. But that's not true, because people who are bitter towards you, they're not mad at you. They're mad at someone, and then someone else, and someone else, and someone else, and someone else, and someone else. And then you just say something a little bit off, and they explode. Why did they explode? It's because there's a pattern. It's not an individualized, I just have this one person and it doesn't affect. The danger in doing this is it becomes a pattern of the way that we deal with conflict, and now those issues live in us over and over, and it will affect and infect every relationship. And so we have to deal with conflict, because if not, we're never going to have the relationship we want. We're never going to have the relationships around us that we think God could have for us. And so we have to break that cycle of going, okay, I'm going to sit down. And there's maybe it's We Bought a Zoo, Matt Damon, is that the We Bought a Zoo? Is that the one where he walks by the window and sees his future wife? And the statement he uses, I think about it all the time. He says, I knew that I only needed 12 seconds of courage. Okay? When I sit down with Jamie, I just need 12 seconds. Hey man, I want to talk. 12 seconds. After 12 seconds, the conversation's going. But the only way to where you want to go is through hard situations. And you can't live your life trying to get around them. You can't get around them. You got to go through. And so I would just say having that conversation with 12, like just going through it, because you don't want the pattern to exist. And here's what I would say, and this is, if you have kids, like you will pass it on. Like the way you deal with conflict, you will pass it on. And to think that I can not like you, but then be so loving to my kids, it is not separate. Those all cross over. And bitterness crosses over, and unforgiveness crosses over. The reason why we forgive is not because anybody deserves it, it's because our kids deserve it. Because we forgive other people so we don't take it out on them, because you do take it out on them. So, that's, yeah.
This has been super helpful. It's been all amazing. I have a quick practical question about Sundays, what Sundays look like. I'm recently coming back to church after COVID. I'm one of those but anyways, so I'm just like.
Everybody has their own level of comfort. Yeah. So yeah. That's
but anyways, so on Sundays, would you recommend, because I find myself pre-COVID, I was, serving in multiple areas, and I found myself kind of rushing to get to A and B, and I have, this to-do list in my mind of what to do, and my heart is people, and so, but obviously we have a recruitment, we need more people on all of our teams and all this stuff, and so my question is, on Sundays, should our priorities be to develop the people that are already on our team? So being available, genuinely caring, and believing for what they're, catching up and all that stuff, or should our Sundays really be dedicated toward the lost, or those who aren't yet plugged in, and we want to, identify what your next step is? So basically, development or recruiting, or somehow a hybrid of both. How can we navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the answer is yes. Yeah. Here's what I would say. I think there is a component of I think figuring out when is the best time to do what. So for us, the best time to invest in the people who serve is before. So it is you have the pre-huddle, hey, how you doing? How's it going? And we ask our teams to be just early enough to have hangout time. So there's a little bit of that on even adjusting the time of, hey, come in so that we can kind of have that. But 20 minutes till service, it's ready. Don't talk to each other. Like ready, break, go out and talk to new people. Like go talk to everybody here. Like on Sundays, you guys at 20 minutes till service, you guys should not talk to each other. Like there's a little bit of that on again, talk together. But like even when I talk to people, I stand side by side looking at the front door. And if one of you guys were with me, I would gladly leave Jamie to go talk to a new like we're gonna, hey man, what's up? Good, how are you? That's awesome, it's good. And I would just leave. I would just go because and he's not gonna be offended by it because we know we're looking out for that new person. We're talking to people. We're going through it. So that's where I would say at that 20 minute, have a time that at 20 minutes this now. We're all at our stations. We're all where we need to be. We're not going to hang out and kind of huddle up together. And so there has to be that. Even the layout in here is so good. It's so casual. But if you guys are all hanging out on the couches and someone new walks in, someone has to be looking for the new person, or else it's like, oh, I guess everyone's got their spot and I'm just going to walk into service. No. So hang out there, but you sit in the seat to look at the front door. So if a new person comes in, you're up. Like that, there's a little bit of that but again, I think before that, but that 20 minutes, we're looking out, and then afterwards, you're in the lobby, high-fiving, hanging out with people. That's what we do. I don't know if that helps on a practical level, but that's been good for us, yeah.
Hi, I don't really need a microphone, but okay, I'll hold it.
They want it for the recording. Let's see.
Okay. So my question is, if I have someone in my life that is living in this learned helplessness mindset, how can I push them out of that and get post-COVID kind of mentality?
That's a great question, by the way. That's a great question because everyone's level of comfort is so different right now. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know what to do. Say that. But I tell you what I've done. Okay? So this may not, for me, it's setting goals. It's the learned helplessness. They begin to believe that it cannot be done, and so you have to set some goals for them on what needs to be done. And so for me, for us as like within a church context, it's I can't, no one wants to serve because of COVID. No one wants to serve anymore. Okay. That's true, but we had X amount of people come to our church this past week. Obviously, they're not afraid. So the excuse lives more in our head than it does in reality. So one of the goals I told our team is, I said, hey, I sat down with every one of our team and said, okay, we're going to have 3 to 5 coffees a week, and you're going to go out, and the whole conversation is, again, you want to check on them, see how they're doing, but it's helping them find their next step. They're going to do it. So setting those goals of 5 coffees a week has helped them break out of that a little bit too, to be able to actually go through it. So there has to be this, what it's done is put us in neutral. You got to give them something to go after in order to break out of this learned helplessness to actually believe that it can happen. And then it's walking with them through the process, kind of guiding them through it. So I don't know if you mean like a kid or somebody at your job, but for me, it's that setting that goal and having them do that. And then in the scenario I'm talking about, there would be that whole consequence. Again, that it plays into the part. So if they don't do what you ask them to do, what are you going to do about it? And so I think being able to set some of those goals, even with your teams, I think it's good. Hey guys, we need 10 new people. So this month, we're going after it. We're going to recruit 10 new people, and the person who recruits the most, we're going to give them a $25 Starbucks gift card, or we're going to give them some of the coffee from your place church, whatever that looks like. I think setting some of those goals will help your teams to get out of that learned helplessness.
That learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Not debilitating.
Yeah.
I think what he just said, we all need to be doing that.
Yeah.
Everybody on our teams, help them out of that learned helplessness season in their life.
Yeah, we are called to lead through it. Yeah. We're called to lead through it. We're not called just to sit in it. We're called to look out and go, okay, how long? As long as we continue, this is true with anything, as long as you say, well, when is it going to be over? It's a little bit is, I mean, it's a little more over than it was, and depending on the news, we'll determine if it's like a little bit of a like. So if we just continue to wait for COVID to be over, when is COVID ever going to be over? And now there's variations, and so the tough thing is at some point you got to say, okay, we're done with the isolation, not hanging out. And I'm not even saying that this is the time, but at some point as leaders, we have to decide it's the time. And now we're going to move forward. Now what are we going to do? We've stopped talking about attendance before pre-COVID, because that's the hard part. Because now we're at 70% of what we were. And so it's, well, how big's your church? Well, pre-COVID, we were blah, 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 blah. No, we dropped 30%. We stopped growing, and now we go forward. And so living in this pre-COVID mentality of, well, before COVID, some of that over the next 6 months will have to work its way out of our vocabulary and as we move forward going through it. But it's helping our teams to go forward and kind of navigate through it. Sorry, did I throw you off?
No, you're fine. I'm just channeling what I was thinking. So I was in a leadership position at a bar and grill, and my employees were super comfortable with me if they needed to come and talk to me. But in a leadership position outside of the church, for every 4 of my girls or 4 of my customers that would come to me and be like, "Hey, can I talk to you? You're a godly person, right?" And they would seek that out. There was that 1 out of 5 that would have the adverse reaction of not wanting to come to me because it wasn't something that they either weren't religious or they weren't comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. So being in a leadership position outside of a church, how do you handle that kind of adversity and that adverse reaction to your faith life?
Yeah, how do you handle? Yeah, for me, I would say it's all through the filter of love. I think there's, regardless of where your faith is or where their faith is, I think you're gonna listen. No matter what happens, I'm gonna help you, and I'm gonna show you love. And I'm gonna be graceful through that whole thing, and there is a little bit of, you will be persecuted. I mean, there is a component of that. But what I would say is, and this is, I feel like I've seen this story over and over again, is that in this season they don't like you because of your faith, but then when they go through it, you are the person they call. And so some of that is you be who you are, you be who God has called you to be, you show love no matter what, you stay with them. And when they go through something, and when they hit a crisis that to a level they've never seen, my dad was, he's a Christian now, but he was huge into drugs, for most of his life. And it's amazing because nobody wants to go to church with them, nobody wants to, but when they go through something and their wife has cancer and something happens, they don't call anybody else. They call their dad. They call my dad because he's the Christian, the one with faith. And so that's where I would say, I think right now they may have an adverse reaction to it, but you just be who you are. I think it's good. Pastor Darian left. Any questions now?
Anyone? Anyone have any more questions? Anyone at all?
Going once, going twice.
So when you talked about running and there was the car by the side of the road that was broken down and how you went to help push them, when you told the story, the whole time I was the runner running with you, you know what I mean? I was the one pushing, and then the other person got in the car.
Yeah.
But then there was a moment you said something about, I don't even remember what it was, but then I became the person who got in the car versus the person pushing. So I think we as leaders have to be not in the person who gets in the car. We have to be the person who.
Yeah, and I think here's what I think the balance in leadership is that there are certain relationships you're in that where you're pushing, and some relationships where you're steering. I think having driven people around you that you're leading, and driven people, I think they need guardrails, but they're easier to kind of guide through the process of you're either steering a car or pushing a car. Steering a car is easier, but sometimes people who are driven, man, they're going to hit the guardrails and do some of that, and it does create a mess. but it'll create a mess, but it will wear you out if you're pushing people. So for me, I think you have to have that balance. One of the things I tell different leaders is that there are people who are going to be on your staff. So I'll think of it outside of the church. Some people who are projects and some people who are products. And you can't have too many projects on your team, or else the whole team starts focusing around just fixing everybody else. Like there has to be enough people that are, hey, they're driven, they got it. Okay, for this season, I think they're driven, but they need us to push them for a little bit. They need to be projects for a little bit for this season. And so it's just finding that balance of how many of those people you have around them. It's good.
So this was great. Come on, give it up for Mike. He did a great job. We have recorded both of these sessions, so if you would like them, we'll tell you how to get that soon. We'll create a kind of a smaller link for it, and we'll post it in either your group me's. So it'll probably start in the staff group me and the staff. For all the staff that are in the room, you can pass it down to your respective group me's. If you're not on group me, ask your person how you guys communicate, and you guys can figure that out. But